Welcome back, everybody. I'm your host, Anthony Ladon, and this is POAT Podcast. Today, we're talking about buy now, pay later, and why millennials and Gen Z's biggest fears in order are getting into debt, dying, and being shipped off to war. We're talking about The Simpsons in Hong Kong, and we're talking about statues. Should we remove them? Should we keep them? And then I go on a weird motivational tangent about why showing up and doing the work is the only way to get better. I'm Anthony Ladon, and you'll hear all that and more on today's POAT Podcast. That was a pretty good intro, right? It felt pretty good. I kind of like it. I realize that every surface in my recording studio is hard, including myself. So there might be a little bit of reverb coming out. I've tried to set it up so that I get maximum reverb. I figure that'll make it feel like an echo chamber, which is kind of what this podcast really is. You know, I rarely have visitors on, and when I do, I enjoy them dearly. Last week, we had cartoonist and comedian Jason Chatfield. Before that, I had on comedian Adam Mueller and had some great discussions with them, talked about some fun stuff. But most of the time, this thing is just an echo chamber. So I wanted to set up the sound to make it feel exactly like what it is. It's just me talking to myself. But more importantly, to all of you. So thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it. That's all I'm going to say about thank yous, because I don't want to become too grateful. I wrote in my newsletter a couple of weeks ago that I don't want to be the guy who says gratitude. It's just it's a weird word. I don't like it. I don't love it. Because if you read my newsletter, you know I don't like it or love it. So anyway, I'm not going to say it. I just want to say thanks for being here. I appreciate it. Let's get on with the show. We got a couple of good topics here. Okay, so first, I took my dog to the vet a couple of weeks ago, and it was a new veterinarian. Does anybody ever say the full word veterinarian, by the way? It sounds so confused. It's like, look, you're a vet. But then again, you don't say doc. I went to the doc as opposed to doctor. So it is a little bit unfair. I went to the vet, Lauren and I took Bailey to the vet. It wasn't that bad. We need to get her claws clipped and then some stuff with her backside. And, okay, if you have a dog, you know, it's her glands. They were a little bit impacted. You know, she's doing a little skaboot thing around on the carpet. That became her primary mode of transportation, was just, if she wanted to get from one end of the room to the other, she would just scoot the whole way. And it was pretty fun to watch, but not fun to think about what could have been left in her wake. So got that fixed. But the vet is kind of it's a weird place. Bailey's my dog, by the way, but Bailey was back in the room, whatever, with the vet. And I went and asked the guy at the front desk, hey, what was the name of the vet that we just met with? And he said, oh, it's Dr. So-and-so. And I laughed. I didn't mean to. It was just an automatic reaction, because I don't think of vets as doctors, primarily because they're not. But they're called doctors. And that doesn't make sense to me, because you wouldn't want to, like, the reason why we call doctors, the only reason why is because they're they do important things. Their job is probably the most important that you would want to know about in an emergency situation. And the only reason we call doctors is so that we can say, if we're on an airplane, hey, is there a doctor on board? Then that doctor can say, oh, they must be referring to me. Yes, I am a doctor. Happy to help. Would a vet raise their hand on a plane? You know, if the stewardess, or we don't call them that anymore. It's not like the 80s. If the flight attendant said, I don't even know. I wasn't even like alive when like stewardesses was like the regular term. I don't know where I picked that up. I guess, I don't know. Well, it was their name for a while, and then they just switched it. But so yeah, like if a flight attendant is like, hey, is there a doctor on board? Does a vet say, yeah, right here? And then they get up there and it's like, oh, well, I didn't know you were talking about a human. I can't do this. God, you should have specified, is there a human doctor on board? And that's a step I don't think we don't want to start taking. What's a vet going to do in that situation? Well, look, I don't know why he's moaning, but I can express his glance. It looks maybe like a heart attack from what I've seen on TV. I don't know. Let me check his paws. It was a good boy. They whip a treat out of their pocket. That's like, or unless it's like a canine, a dog. I don't know why I said canine, but like a dog. If there's a dog on board, if there's a dog on board and the stewardess / flight attendant says, "Is there a doctor on board?" and a doctor says, "Yeah, how can I help?" and they're like, "Well, it's a dog." Like that's just you're not going to, they would say, "Is there a vet? Is there a vet on board?" And then that vet would go, fix them. And they shouldn't be called doctors. I think we need to differentiate the two and just not call them. I understand that they haven't even received a doctorate, have they? Like, they're not even the pseudo doctors. Like, I understand doctor, if you're a professor, technically, if you have a doctorate degree, yeah, okay. You doctor is part of your official name, Dr. So-and-so. Not people aren't going to call you that in like real life, unless you're at an academic setting. If you're having drinks at a soiree up in your ivory tower, then yeah, like, doctor. But no, let's leave doctors to doctors. It's the common thing. It's something that we all can agree on, and I thought we all did. Don't correct me in a vet. Well, you saw Dr. So-and-so. No, I didn't. I saw the vet. Okay. I mean, I get, yeah. Actually, here's a good question. Does their official name, like mine is Mr., does theirs say doctor? When they receive mail, do you address it to doctor whatever? I don't know. This is are there any vets out there? DM me at Anthony Ladon on Instagram. Hit me up. I'd love to hear, what people should be called. But this is a big question that I have. And it's actually not just a question. It's something I've been thinking about for weeks since this incident happened. Doctor, you're not a doctor. I get that you're an important person. Your job is very important. Absolutely. I don't mean to disparage the work that you do. Let's check it a little bit and let's maybe say, I think you can do it without the highfalutin title, because that's just confusing to the rest of us. If you're at a dinner party, would you announce yourself as, "Hi, I'm Dr. Ladon." "Oh, what kind of doctor what kind of medicine do you practice?" "Dogs." That's not, mostly things with 4 legs. Because then it's kind of a bait and switch. I feel like, if someone introduced, I just like, well, okay. Again, you're doing great work. Love you. Thank you for supporting my dog, fixing it, squeezing its glands. She hated it, but loves it after the fact that she doesn't have to scoot around anymore. She can actually walk on 4 legs instead of scooting around on her butt. Okay, so, the other weird thing about the vet is every time I go to the vet, I feel like I'm at like I feel like I'm going to a mechanic. Okay? It's like I go in there just to get the glands checked, but then they're like, "Yeah, look, the glands are bad. We're going to have to fix those, but we're going to have to do a full checkup too." And then they give me an itemized list of all the things. I go in there thinking I might spend $150. I walk out, with basically Bailey's totaled. I'm going to have to get a new dog. I do appreciate, though, the nice thing about this vet that we went to, and I'll for sure go back. First of all, the vet was amazing. She was super nice. The tech that was there, she was also super nice. Okay, nothing against them. It's just more of my experience with vets in general. This is how I feel. It feels like going to a mechanic. Like, look, glands are bad. And then they actually gave me an itemized list of, we can do all these other things that we think she needs. They wanted to check her brakes, fluids. So I didn't know if she had windshield wipers. I mean, you got to get those fixed. But it was nice, actually. The vet left the room, and then we got to negotiate with the tech. And even the tech said, "Look, you don't need to do all these things. You can just do the glands and clip the paws, or clip the claws, and we'll be good to go." And that was great. I felt great, because we're like, "Well, do we have to do all this?" And the vet was like, "Look, you don't have to do any of this. In fact, The glands will probably take care of themselves, but if you want to stop the scooting, we'll take care of it. It was great. That I loved, because you got the sense, talking to the vet, like, oh my God, we're gonna be in $1,000 getting this thing fixed. Is it worth it? And of course not. I mean, we only spent $600 to buy her. $100 in gas to get out to the woods, but to pick her up. But it wasn't that expensive of a dog. Love her, and I don't know what my upper limit would be. At what point we considered she was totaled. I'm not going to get insurance. That's because if it's that bad, I'm not going to get pet insurance. Okay, that's one step too far. Who are these people that get pet insurance? It's a dog, an amazing animal, a part of your family. Love it dearly, but it's not a Ferrari. It's not. If it gets dinged up, it's like, all right, well, we'll wrap it up and we'll feed her some good food and we'll make sure she's comfortable. They did use that phrase. I didn't understand why, because it's not like she has any sort of terminal illness. She's fine. And they're like, well, with all this stuff that we had to do, it might be worth it just to make sure she's comfortable. Comfortable? What? She just looked at her. Does she have a tumor? No. Just need to clip her claws. I don't understand. I don't understand why they would say, we need to make her comfortable. I think I do like the vet. It's a nice place. They actually had Wi-Fi. They had plugs. I might just go there to hang out. I go in there to charge my phone. And they have treats, for the dogs, but they're actually pretty tasty. So I had a couple. It's just dehydrated chicken and beef and other mystery meat. Bailey / me loved them all. And I got a little to-go packet. What is it called at the restaurants? When they give you the little treats to go. It's not the thing that means little ovens, petite fours. It's not those. It's like it's a bag, whatever. It's a take-home thing, and it's nice. The vet did that, so I'll for sure go back. I don't even know if it's overpriced. I don't care. It's a nice place. It looks clean. It's the people there are super friendly. Despite the negotiation every time. But yeah, that's my favorite part of any meeting is a negotiation. So I'm happy to do that. Look, we walked in, think it was just going to be $200. I mean, come on. You want to take a paw? You can just take a paw. Take the paw off. Clip it up at the shoulder. I'm not a very good negotiator. But yeah, so that was my experience about going to the vet. Is they're not doctors, and they're also not mechanics. They're vets, right? That's the name of your job. It's not even like the fake doctor, like the MDs, or what do they call the ones that aren't really doctors? The naturopaths, or like the allopaths, the ones who like kind of rock you back and forth. The osteopaths? No, there's the good ones and then the weird ones. Doctors out there, do you know it's osteopath and allopath, right? The two kind of schools of medicine. It's definitely not chiro. Those are, I know, quacks. It's basically a massage therapist with insurance. But anyway, vets, yeah, I don't know. Just don't. That was an experience. Saying it was Dr. So and so. Because I think we should keep doctors. And then it's nice to know who's a doctor and who's not, because it's like, all right, if I have an issue, I'm gonna go talk to that guy. Anyway. That's enough about doctors. I read in the news that The Simpsons just launched, or recently launched. I read in the news that The Simpsons recently launched in Hong Kong. Now I realize that doesn't mean anything to any of us for the most part, because I don't think I have any listeners out there in Hong Kong yet. Actually, I don't think I'm allowed in Hong Kong. I may have said something negative about the Communist Party or about your dear leader, and I might not be welcome there. I don't know. Do they allow the internet like outside? I mean, now that China has taken over, are you guys even allowed? Because you're under the umbrella, right? The digital umbrella. Okay. Anyway, but so Simpsons are now in Hong Kong. Disney Plus launched there. Simpsons is in the lineup, but interestingly, one episode is missing from the lineup. This is something I read in the news. It's not like I went and checked. Like, I wonder if this episode is missing. I've seen like 10 episodes of The Simpsons in my entire life, and I'm sure it's a great show. Just haven't gone back for more. But it's in the episode. I think it's Goo Goo Gai Pan, And in the episode, the Simpsons family goes to China, and then they see a plaque that says, "In 1989, nothing happened here." I think it says that something, but it's kind of funny because they basically go to Tiananmen Square, and there's a plaque that says, "In 1989, nothing happened here," and that episode is conveniently missing from the lineup. Now, this isn't that surprising, considering it is China, and they're not, you're not allowed to say anything bad. But it kind of reminded me. Oh, and now, okay, so that's the first part. There's the censorship issue. Now, is Disney basically just playing that? Did they pull it out proactively? Are they just playing nice, to not ruffle Chi's feathers? Xi's feathers. Is it she or Chi? I think it's she, right? Okay, Xi Jinping? Xi Jinping? Okay, I apologize to you. I don't know how to pronounce your name. It's XI. Chi. Xi? Chi. Ni hao? Okay. Chinese was actually, or Mandarin was actually a fun language to kind of learn a few words. I can say, I'd like 2 beers, please, and that's about it. Which is arguably all I would want to know traveling through China, because it's the most important thing. Also, maybe, can I get out of jail now? And where are we? It's difficult. Okay, so now I'm definitely not allowed within Hong Kong or China. But okay, so and then in this article that I was reading about The Simpsons, this is all from the Wall Street Journal, by the way, in case you want to follow along with me. I don't know why the heck you would, but so Hong Kong actually removed a statue that they had. Why would it be in Hong Kong? Now, this is an interesting thing. They actually had removed a statue. Oh, I think they had a statue in a park commemorating the Tiananmen Square massacre. And Hong Kong removed it. The government removed it. And I thought that's kind of it's interesting arguing about that, because I know the circumstances are different, but it's a little bit similar to how statues are being removed here. Similar and different. Okay? And hear me out here before you pick a side. On the one hand, these things happened. Tiananmen Square happened. They had a statue erected to commemorate it, to not celebrate the bad thing, but to remember it. It's not a happy thing, obviously, and it's not like there was a winner and a loser there. It was, a cultural thing that happened, and that statue helped remind people about the bad stuff that happened. Now, in this case, it happened to be a bad thing that the government did to the people. So it's a little bit different, but it's kind of but okay. And then obviously the government has changed. The argument's kind of fallen apart. So maybe I shouldn't draw the similarities. And maybe it's a little bit different than statues being removed here. Let's just focus on the statues being removed here. Okay. So I don't know where I fall on this, because I can kind of see both sides on the argument of, should we remove statues and should we not remove statues? On the one hand, right, take a statue of Thomas Jefferson, who I think they're moving the statue because he owned slaves at one point. I think he was quite friendly with some of them, and the other Civil War era figures, right? Especially in the South, and then also in the North, they're renaming schools. But let's focus on the statues thing, because I think that's an interesting thing. On the one hand, these things happened, right? And do this on the pro side, I can kind of see well, either way, these statues help us remember that this bad thing happened. Actually, there was oh man, I'm going to have to look this up. I cannot remember what it was, but I think it was an episode of Star Trek. No, maybe it was, okay, I can't remember, but the actor is Ron Canada, and he was, and I can't remember the issue. So just go with me on this issue just for a second here. But in the show, I thought it was Star Trek because it's a little bit easier to argue about this kind of stuff in a sci-fi world where there's no stakes. But it could have been, just a police procedural show. But they were trying to remove statues in this world, and Ron Canada said, we cannot remove these statues. And Ron Canada was part of the group that was, on the losing end, or the statues were basically his enemies. Okay, so he basically argued, let's keep these statues. Let's not remove them, because I never want to forget that this bad thing happened. I thought that was an interesting point, and I think that's applicable in our situation here. because these people were fighting for something that nowadays, not a great thing. Even back then, it was not a great thing, obviously. But there were a group of people that wanted to preserve it. Slavery, the Union. Well, obviously, they were fighting for secession. But, okay, so that's the one side. Keeping the statues reminds us the bad stuff happened. On the other hand, our values do change over time as a nation and are, collectively. And the statues weren't actually, they weren't put up. They weren't built to commemorate, bad things. They were meant to honor these people who did at the time they thought good things, right? They were created to honor the people. So it was created, these people created it to honor a group of people who were important to them. And maybe it's time that we don't commemorate those people anymore, right? So if the statue was created to commemorate a bad guy, somebody fighting for the South, fighting for slavery, whatever, can we leave it up and just change the meaning? Or do we need to remove it? I look at it as kind of like, I imagine if you're a parent and your kid comes home with a piece of art that they drew in school, and you're like, wow, this is a work of art. This is great. I'm going to put it up on the fridge. And then 2 years later, they come back with a way better piece of art because the first one was kind of trashy. And do you still leave the old one up, to remember like, hey, this was a terrible piece of art, but you did it, and we're going to see how far we've come. We're going to put the new one up right next to it. And now you can actually draw a human with fingers, and daddy has hair now, or maybe, he didn't in the first place, but that it's 3-dimensional instead of just a square with a triangle on top, which is how I still draw houses, by the way, and how I think they should be drawn. Right? But do you tell your kid, look, this old one's pretty terrible. I like what it stood for at one point, but now I don't. And so it's coming down. I don't know. This is a big topic. And I know that, it's not the first time people are talking about this, but I thought it was an interesting thing, especially with regard to the Simpsons episode Missing. We have censorship there. Is Disney proactively doing this? Or did China say, nope, take it out? Or in this case, the Hong Kong kind of puppet government there. And then that also brings to attention the fact that they removed the statue commemorating the Tiananmen Square massacre. Now, interestingly, I don't know where that statue ended up. I didn't have a little Apple tag on it or Apple tile on it, whatever it's called. I can't track it. But it's like, what are we doing with ours? I know that they moved the Thomas Jefferson one to like the Thomas Jefferson Memorial or something, or they're moving it to a museum, which is great. At least they're not getting rid of these things. I hope. Because that'd be sad. Some of them, we need some place to remember this stuff. I think it's important because if you forget that it happened, then maybe you'll do it again. Well, actually, maybe that's an argument then to keep that shitty piece of artwork up on the fridge. Because then it's like, look, this is the way you used to draw art. Don't draw like this again. And, people are going to come by, they're going to see it, they're going to remember the bad art that you drew. And it might be embarrassing for you, but you did it. So I don't know. I could kind of see that going either way. I don't know. Where do you fall on the issue? That's how I fall. I realize it's going to be, let me know in the DMs. Hit me up in the DMs and Insta. I'm still weird about saying hit me up in the DMs because that's a phrase I always used to make fun of. And now that I'm back on Instagram, I got to get used to it. Anthony Ladon is my username. Is it username, tag, handle? Whatever it is, just let me know what you thought. I'd love to know where people fall on statues. Take them, leave them, destroy them, preserve them, put them somewhere special. I don't know. Okay, I also read recently about the huge prevalence of buy now, pay later type things like Klarna, Affirm. You see them every time you're checking out, for clothes. I think Nordstrom offers it now too. There's a bunch of these things. And it's really big with millennials and Gen Zers because their number one fear. Yeah, this is the interesting thing here. Their number one fear is credit card debt. Right? Numbers 2 and 3 are death and going to war, like being shipped off to war. And to me, that means like if you're going to be in a foreign country, you would rather be a soldier getting shot than there on vacation. Well, who's going to pay for it? You know, that doesn't make sense to me. How I don't understand why you would fear credit card debt. You just don't spend. And look, this is coming from a guy who's been in debt before. I have jokes, I have material about this because I'm still working through it, but I'm not still paying it off. Like that's the thing. We got deep into debt when we came to New York, and we just kept spending. It was a losing proposition. I think we banked on hope. That was it. It's like, well, things are going to get better. We're going to cut back. I had a spreadsheet projecting out, income levels and debt levels, and it just kept getting redder and redder until we finally said, "This is stupid. We're making terrible decisions while in debt," and we just drained one of our 401ks. I don't think we completely drained it. It was pretty bad. And the worst part is we had to give some of that money to the government as a penalty. And that's adding salt and lemon juice to an open wound, is knowing that you've got to give some of that money to the big old GOV. But we did it, and it was so freeing. It was just being deep in debt and then all of a sudden not. Like to see zero balance on all the credit cards was, oh God, that was such a freeing feeling. Now, so I don't understand why that's a fear, is because you can always get out of it. You can stop and you can prevent yourself from getting worse into it. Like that's what we did. All we did was say, well, this isn't getting any better. Let's make good decisions now. So we went from paying almost $4,000 a month in rent in a studio apartment in New York. And we're like, well, let's go live with the parents. We did that for a month, and then missed having our own stuff in our own place. And so we lived in the Tacoma Mall parking lot, not in a van. They actually had an apartment unit there they built. Now, growing up as a kid, I used to go to Tacoma Mall all the time, and that used to be just a parking lot. And then they put up a building there, and it was like, well, as a kid, I always thought, that's where I want to live. And we did that for a year, and it was like $1,000 a month, and it was amazing, and it was the nicest place that we have ever lived in for the money. Like that was a pretty good value option. There was a diner, 2 blocks away at, a 1-story diner. We didn't have, those don't exist in New York. So anyway, that's millennials and Gen Z's fear, is getting into debt or having debt. And I don't get it, because you can control it. It's not like now your number 2 fear, millennials and Gen Zers, is death. I get that. You can't really control when you die. I mean, you can kind of influence it a little bit. Actually, you can influence it a lot. But, there's always the mystery of like, well, what if, what if I fall? That's where I went with that, Anthony? Ugh. It's, what if I fall? Yeah, I'm 92 years old. That's my biggest fear, is like, well, what if I fall? Okay. But, you can control this, millennials. What's your deal? Just stop spending money. Get roommates. Make the tough decision. I actually think that's part of growing up, is learning to make those tough decisions. Stop spending money on stupid crap. When we got into that, I'll tell you, we would go out to dinner several times a week, to a not cheap dinner. Like it would be $100 a pop every time, at least. And that was like we knew it was a familiar place. We got drinks comped, there. So it was like, oh, it's great. And it was a fun choice, not a wise choice. And actually, there are some economists who would argue that during your 20s and 30s, it's better to dis-save, because you can then shift your priorities to saving later on in life. Because then while you're young and before you've hit peak income levels, like in your 40s and maybe your 50s, they would advise that in order to increase the utility of your life, maybe it's okay to disspend. Don't take that as like, well, Anthony said it's now fine for me to spend through the nose or pay through the nose and get into debt. But some economists would say it's okay to do that as long as you have the ability to shift gears, when you hit 35, maybe 40, and start to get out of debt and, grow up. I don't like that. That's not comfortable for me. I'd rather have a nest egg. Now, I don't even want to retire. That's the other thing. As a creative, I don't know many creatives who want to, like, that they actually think about retirement. That's the other difference between a creative and someone who works at a job, a regular old job. Is, you want to save up money so that you can stop doing your job at some point. Now, of course, everybody wants to be able to stop doing their job at some point, maybe 90. But I think it'd be fun to still tell jokes and write, into my 80s and 90s. Like, that's the point. We're doing things we love, ideally. I don't think anybody gets into being a creative, telling jokes or writing books just for the money, because you've got a slog ahead of you. I think that takes years to get to. I'll let you know when I get there. But the point is, everybody. I think that's why we. But anyway, where was I going with this? Oh, how did I get into this? Buy now, pay later was the thing. Oh yeah, so it's millennials' fear and Gen Z's fear is getting into debt, and you can control it, right? I mean, like, and why are you afraid of that, Gen Z and millennials? I mean, I'm a millennial too, and so I kind of get it, but I also want to say, like, you've got this. Just stop spending. Don't buy that thing that you want to buy. Buy the thing you need to buy. Keep your car running so you can get to your job or whatever it is. I don't know. I know I'm saying this and it sounds very easy, but I'm telling you, I've been there. This is not a financial podcast, by the way. It shouldn't be. But we were deep in debt, and I know that crippling feeling. So I understand the fear a little bit. But going back, I also understand it was all my fault. It was all we were at a point where we wouldn't take cabs ever, because every time you take a cab, it's probably $15. And even now, it's like, well, I won't. Even now, I'll take it just because I don't want to get stabbed on the subway. But it used to be like we wouldn't leave. We'd go, and downside, obviously, we'd go like right across the street for dinner 5 times a week, and that would be our budget, was burning a hole. That's how we spent money, was just on food mostly. Although we did some travel and stuff that wasn't very smart. It was fun. I wouldn't change it, because it did give me some perspective on, like, all right, tighten up. And then making the sacrifice, that was however much money I had to pay to the government, and it was not a small amount, I think was worth it. It was nice to have a lesson, kind of a penance. It's kind of like going to confession, and you don't just get off scot-free by doing 10 Hail Marys. Well, actually, that would be penance, So you got to pay. You got to say a lot of Hail Marys, like 10,000. And yeah. But anyway, why are you afraid? What are you afraid of? A death I get. Going to war, I kind of get, but you're not going to be drafted. I mean, most likely. So don't be afraid. Don't fear. You're young and invincible, right? Millennials and Gen Zers, you've got the world. The world's in your hand. All right. Oh, the whole point of this thing was the article was actually pretty interesting. It was, I wish I could remember the guy's name. Scott Galloway, a fun guy, outspoken, and he's a professor at NYU in the business school, and I can't remember what else he does. But he had a book called Post Corona, which I actually thought was very interesting. The gist of which is the outcome of, and he wrote it during the pandemic early on, about a year ago. But he said the outcome is going to be, it's going to exacerbate the rich companies, or profitable companies are going to become more profitable. Non-profitable companies will become less profitable. And that, I think, has kind of played out a little bit. But anyway, it's his newsletter. I'd recommend signing up for it. His name is Scott Galloway. But it was about buy now, pay later, how millennials and Gen Zers are so afraid of accumulating credit card debt that they don't want to spend on credit cards. And instead, they're buying this buy now, pay later thing, which is, if you want to buy a pair of pants for $200, let's say it's a nice pair of pants, you now have the option to spread it out over, let's say, 4 payments or 6 payments, installments. And Gen Zers and millennials are flocking to it because it's not credit, except that it totally is credit. He makes the argument that it's basically credit without the benefits. You don't get any points for it. You have to, let's say it's 4 payments just to make the math easy, but that $200 pair of pants, you've got to make your 4 payments of $50 a piece, or else you get hit with fees, which is different than a credit card where you put zero money down and you've got, depending on how you work out your cycles, you've got 4 to 5, maybe 6 weeks to pay it off without any interest, which is better. I mean, you've got a little more time, but you also get points and your credit score takes a positive bump. It's nice. I don't know what the fear is. So anyway, I'm curious to hear from millennials and Gen Zers out there. Why are you guys diving? Do you use buy now, pay later, like Klarna and Affirm and whatever? I'm curious. Let me know. I don't, because I love the points I get from, I probably have a dozen credit cards, and I don't, I don't have a debt. I don't have a balance on any of them. I just use them for the points. Like where I could use cash to pay for something, I always use a credit card so that I always get points back. And it's great. I was texting with a friend of mine this morning, and he said, I've been watching your stand-up videos, and it definitely looks like you're getting better over time, which was a very nice text message to get, especially when it's hard to see, any sort of improvement when you're in it, when you're doing things. You can kind of feel it. And I think that was a nice reminder, a nice pause point it was a nice reminder that it's okay to take a moment to pause and realize, like, okay, I've come a long way from where I started out. Now, to be clear, where I started out was not great. So, coming a long way is like, all right, let's check ourselves. It's not like we're not great here. But where I'm going with this is, I think I already talked about this. Did I talk about play to win? Oh man. Okay. If I've already talked about this and you've heard this, skip ahead like 5 minutes. And I apologize. I'm very sorry. Okay. But if not, then listen in. Okay. So where was I going with this? Oh, so, when I was in college, I had a college professor. I think I did talk about this. I had a college professor. If I have talked about this and you've heard it, fast forward. I can't remember. If not, then listen in. Okay. When I was in college, I had a professor. I was taking a class that only had about 8 students in it, and we had to read a whole book, in a week for a discussion. And that the whole class was basically sitting around. It was basically a glorified book club. Not even glorified. It was actually a way more intense book club. Because most book clubs are just wine. This one was 8 students, no wine, and a teacher. But anyway, he got mad one day because nobody had done the reading, and he threw his book down. He's like, "You guys, you've got to play to win." And that phrase has stuck with me for a long time. Well, at least since then. How many years? 2005, 6, 16 years? Okay. It stuck with me 16 years. And what I love about it is it's such a great reminder that if you're going to play the game, whatever the thing is that you're doing, you should play to win. You should give it your all. But it's also it cuts a different way and has a different meaning that if you want to win, you actually have to play the game. You actually have to show up and do the work. Okay. And where I'm going with this is I feel like I've only really started to sit down and work on my craft in the last year or so. I kind of farted around for 4 years. I did the same 5 to 10 minutes of material, and it was fine. But now I feel like in the last year, it's nice to actually, I think that's the only way to get better is to do the reps, sit down, put in the butt in the chair time to actually do your thing. So if it's writing a book, which is now something my wife and I are going to be doing together. Oh yeah, announcement. If you missed it on my Instagram, I announced that Lauren and I are going to be writing a book together, which is pretty exciting news, I think. You may not think so. Maybe you don't like books or don't like reading or don't like me. In which case, what the heck are you doing listening to this podcast? But anyway, so yeah, we just signed a book deal that we are stoked about. And here's the quick backstory on that. So a couple of summers ago, we wrote a screenplay together, and then we tried to shop it around. We got an offer on it, and we're still kind of negotiating on that, and we're looking for more offers, obviously. So if your name is Hollywood, don't forget to read it. Talk to my agent on my website. But anyway, So we're still shopping that around. But in the meantime, our agent went ahead and sold the novel rights, the book rights to the book. So basically, we're going to write a book first, and then the movie whenever it comes out, which I have a great feeling about. I shouldn't jinx it, but I feel like it's a good movie. Yeah, the screenplay is pretty funny. Anyway, but we're gonna now have a book based on a movie. So anyway, we got to start writing that. But in order to do that, we have to sit down, put our butts in chairs, and actually write the friggin' words. She knows that. She's written 42 books or published 42 books. I know that. I published one book that never saw the light of day, but it happened. And in order to do that, I had to actually do my thing. And this same thing with writing material. If I want to get better, if I want to actually make people laugh, which is the whole reason I'm doing this thing, I've got to actually sit down and write. I've got to show up to the show and tell jokes. But for so long, I just told the same 5 jokes. And actually, so I after bouncing around in this community for a little bit, there's a lot of people who do that. So I'm not the only one. And there's comfort. I think that's why I did it, was because I knew, like, okay, I know this joke gets a laugh, and I can go up and perform, and it's fine. And I think some of that's okay if you want to work on the performative aspect of comedy. The telling of the joke and your stagecraft, because that's part of it. But if you want to work on the more important part, which is the material, dude, you got to write more and better. Right? Listen to the stuff you just talked about on stage. See if anybody laughed. If there's no laughter, that tape is easy to listen to that. Then it's like, okay, none of those worked. Let's move on. But where people laughed, work on that. Do more of that. Anyway. But I think that applies to whatever your thing is. If it's like Lauren is actually working on, one of the things she wanted to do more of was drawing, like art. And it's crazy seeing the difference in the flowers and the trees that she would draw when she first started, and then compared to now, where she's actually been doing it for several months and actually sitting down every day and writing, sketching it out. And it's crazy to see the difference. Now I got to rip down the stuff on the fridge. This is a callback, by the way, to the earlier thing about statues. But now I got to tear down, the earlier artwork, because our values have changed. We're no longer racists, and that we got to put up the new artwork, because it's great. She did the same thing with watercolors. I'm working on piano now. I'm kind of getting back in touch with that. But it's weird sitting back down to an instrument that you stopped playing, 20 years ago, and you don't have this. I don't have the same dexterity, so now it's like, okay, I've got to sit down and actually practice every single day. I have a guitar lesson this afternoon, and I haven't touched the guitar in like 2 months, so I'm a little bit nervous on that. But the thing is, when I was actually playing it again, I got a little incrementally better, a little tiny bit, and that's fun. It's fun to see the changes. So whatever your thing is, do it. This is turning like a motivational speech. That's not the point of this podcast. It was, but I guess that's what we're doing. This is really, maybe it's just for posterity. Maybe it's a reminder to myself. Even actually, okay, maybe I'll make this more applicable to real people, and not just, comedians who have nothing better to do than listen to each other's podcasts all day. But when I was a recruiter, or actually before that, when I was a consultant, and I had to teach myself how to code to do my job. And it was fun because I could learn a little bit each day. And, if I showed up and I did the work, I got better. I eventually worked myself out of a job because this isn't Anthony flouting his abilities or anything. It's not that sensational. It was an Excel macro. It's basically all it did. And it copied and pasted my name, and it said Anthony did his work. But yeah, it was fun to see, if you actually did something, if you actually tried, things work out. So this is just a reminder to myself to actually sit down and try every now and then, because there's comfort. You know what? If you need a little kick in the pants, sign up for James Clear's newsletter. I swear to God, every Thursday those come out, and every Thursday it's like a kick it's both a kick in the nuts and the butt. It's a kick in the butt because it's like, dude, you can do better. You can become a better person. You can work harder, work smarter, all that fun stuff, achieve more. And it's very invigorating reading those. I'm like, yes, I want to be a person that lives like these people, that he quotes or whatever. But it's also a kick in the nuts because it's like, dude, what were you doing? You're just living a life of comfort, sitting down, relaxing, not working harder, plying your craft, being afraid. That's the fun part too of doing stand-up, is like every time you're just a little bit afraid. And every time that's a reminder, like, this is the thing I should be doing. I like that. I probably read that in a James Clear newsletter. It's Clear. Yeah, he wrote Atomic Habits. If you haven't read that, it's an incredible book. But check it out. Anyway, point is, doing things that you're scared of, I think, is a great little tidbit of advice that I'm pretty sure I picked up from one of his newsletters, where it's like, yeah, that's the only way I'm going to grow as a person, is by doing something that is not in my comfort zone. If I stay in my comfort zone, I'm just like, okay, I'm just going to stick here. But if I go a little bit out, yeah, I might bomb. But the point is to do it kind of in a measured way so you don't go too far out. If I'm going to jump out of a plane, I need to have a parachute. Is that the analogy I wanted to make? I don't know. We're going to kill this thing now. This has been fun. Thank you so much for listening. If you have questions, topic suggestions, need some advice, or have some advice, I'll take it. Hit me up in the DMs on Instagram at Anthony Ledonne, Ledonne. I'm sorry for the spelling, but just get used to it. Thanks so much for listening. I'm Anthony Ledonne, and this has been another episode of POAT Podcast.